Good evening, everyone. And as always, thank you so much for joining. I followed the usual format of muting everyone, but please feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to ask anything or to pose any questions via the chat. We're continuing with learning the A to Z of Halachos of Havdala, trying to understand both the halachic framework for it and the Hashkafic insight around it, and also how these halachas and concepts apply to ladies' fulfillment of the mitzvah. And I'd really like to try and cover this week two areas. The first is to finish off discussing the halachas of the light, the flame, the candle that we use for Havdalah. And secondly, to begin talking about the issue of ladies' obligation in Havdalah, and particularly the very interesting and fascinating topic of drinking wine in Havdalah, which I was asked to address. So we spoke last week about this beautiful and incredible bracha of Borim Orei Ha'esh. It's a Birchas HaShvach, it's a bracha of praise to Hashem on light. And we discussed two interpretations of the bracha, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, whether the bracha is based on different midrashic origins of the bracha, whether the bracha is on the concept of light as created by Hashem, or whether we are making a bracha on our ability to create light, the human mastery of technology, which light symbolizes, gifted to us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So however one understands the concept of the bracha, Motzi Shabbos, after we finished Shabbos, we now go back to our work week. We now go back to mastering the world. On Shabbos, we stepped back and we reminded ourselves and recognized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the master of the world. But now we're starting the working week. And a lot of Havdalah is built around that theme, the psukim of Hinei Ken Yeshuasi, words of encouragement and a reminder of bitachon and trust in Hashem. And similarly, the brachas that we make of Borim Orei Ha'esh is a once a week bracha of praise to Hashem that we now say in recognition of starting off the working week and our mastery of technology. And linked, as the Medrash says, to the story of Adam HaRishon, post Shabbos, the world gets dark, he's panicking, how am I going to be able to cope in the darkness of night? And either Hashem, or directly, or creates for him light, or Hashem gives him the wisdom so that he can create light, as we discussed, and that's why we make the bracha then. Now, just a few of the halachas linked to this. The first is that this bracha is only made on a Motzi Shabbos. We will see later that if one is unable to make Havdalah on Motzi Shabbos, one can say Havdalah through till Tuesday. Nonetheless, the bracha of Borim Orei Ha'esh over a fire is only made on Motzi Shabbos due to the concepts that we've discussed already, that uniquely linked to Motzi Shabbos, to the end of Shabbos, is this time and occasion of saying this weekly bracha of praise to Hashem on the creation of light. The bracha of Borim Orei Ha'esh, by the way, is not ma'akev. If one is unable to make the bracha, it doesn't ruin or cause the rest of Havdalah to be ineffective. And therefore, if for some reason one is unable to make the bracha of Borim Orei Ha'esh, for example, it's Motzi Shabbos, and you don't have a candle or matches, and you're unable to light a fire, one should nonetheless make Havdalah. And if later you get access to a fire, then later you can make Borim Orei Ha'esh, even much later in the night, as long as it is still Motzi Shabbos and not the next day. So this is the halacha of Borim Orei Ha'esh. Now, every participant in Havdalah has to benefit from the flame. We already discussed how one benefits from the flame. It's by using the flame to see something, to distinguish between one thing and another. And our custom is that we look at our nails and distinguish between the flesh of the hands and the nails. And we discussed last week the insight of the Mekabalim, the Kabbalists, about why we use our nails for this. But be that as it may, this is how we do it. But as far as Kol Halacha is concerned, any use of the fire to see with is enough to make the bracha, because we're using the fire and therefore able to give praise to Hashem for the light, but the practice is that we look at our nails in so doing. Now, when we do a mitzvah, we hold or actually make any bracha, we hold the object of the mitzvah or the bracha in our right hands. So for example, or our main hand, for most people, that's our right hand. For example, if one's holding the shofar to blow the shofar, or one is making a bracha on a fruit, an apple, one holds it in the right hand as the more powerful, significant hand to give kavod and chashiva, significance to the mitzvah. And then one makes the bracha on eating the apple or blowing the shofar. When it comes, however, to the bracha that we make of borei me'orei ha'esh, there we hold the flame in our left hand so that it is our right hand that benefits from the flame. So in the context of light and fire, it's not the hand that holds the object that matters, like it would with an apple or a shofar, but it's the hand that benefits from the light that matters, and therefore we use our right hand to benefit from the light of the fire. Now, as I said, everyone needs to benefit from the light. If one is making Havdalah in a family setting, this is quite easy. The person who is making Havdalah says the bracha and is motzi, exempts everyone through their bracha. So everyone fulfills their bracha on the flame by hearing that. And then each person puts their hand up to benefit from the flame. However, if one is in a mass Havdalah, for example, Havdalah said in Shul on Motzi Shabbos, or perhaps at a Simcha, please God in the very near future we'll be able to celebrate Simchas together, or some sort of kumzit or event. Often what will happen is the person making Havdalah will make the bracha, and then the flame or the candle will be held aloft or high, and everyone will try and benefit from it. If one's back at the crowd, the person may not pause long enough for me to get close to the flame to benefit from it on time. And therefore I won't have benefited from the flame and fulfilled this praise to Hashem, which is the custom and the mitzvah on Motzi Shabbos. So what shall I do? I can listen to the rest of Havdalah, and then after Havdalah, as long as I don't interrupt, I can now go over to the flame and benefit from it. And this doesn't count as a hefsek. It's not an illegitimate interruption, because I've merely listened to the rest of Havdalah, and now I'm fulfilling the mitzvah by now going up to the flame. If I realize in advance that I may not get to the flame on time, or I think it's likely that I won't manage to get to it straight after Havdalah because of the crowds, I can have in mind not to be yoked to the bracha said by the person saying Havdalah. And after Havdalah, I can go up to the flame and then say the bracha myself on the flame. So these are two ways of dealing with the issue, but each person needs to benefit from the flame. What sort of flame should be used? So I mentioned last week, and I just want to mention this in a little more detail now. The flame that should be used is ideally a powerful flame, rather than a single wick is a multi-wick, a vukah, a multi-wick torch with several wicks, like our Havdalah candles that we use when we make Havdalah. However, if one doesn't have access to such a multi-wick candle, one can use two candles held together. If one doesn't have access to that, one can also make Havdalah on a single flame. One can make a borei me'orei ha'esh on a single flame. One uses a multi-flame candle for two reasons. Firstly, because the language of the bracha is me'orei ha'esh, the lights of the fire in the plural, rather than the singular of ma'or ha'esh. And we discussed that last week, that this refers to the lights of the world. It doesn't refer to the scientific force of light. The scientific concept of light, which is one fire. Beis Shammai thought the bracha was on the scientific concept or existence of light as a concept, and therefore said a singular. But we Paskin like Beis Hillel, we say it in the plural because we refer to multiple lights, and therefore many humans make lights. We say it in the plural. Nonetheless, the bracha ideally is said on multiple lights to reflect this language of plurality of me'orei ha'esh. If one only has a single light, one can do so. Similarly, the light should be a light that is designed for or used for vision, for light. It shouldn't be a flame that is there for some other reason. So one couldn't make the bracha on, for example, the gas that one has under a pot, which is made for heating, because this is for heat, not for light. Similarly, if one has a fireplace with a fire in that's warming one up, again, the heat, it's made for heat, not light, and therefore this wouldn't be sufficient. Similarly, if one has light for other reasons, like a yahrzeit candle or other mitzvah reasons, since it isn't there to illuminate, one wouldn't make the bracha on it. The bracha is made on ma'orei ha'esh, on the light and illumination of the fire. That aspect of it is what we are making the bracha on. Finally, this should be a light that was not lit on Shabbos, either by a non-Jew on Shabbos or lit illegitimately against halacha by a Jew. If it is lit on Shabbos in a mutter way, for example, lit for an ill person, in other scenarios, then it can be used for Havdalah. Similarly, one can use a light that was lit on Erev Shabbos and has remained a light the whole of Shabbos, but a light that was lit in a breach of halacha, like a light lit by a Jew, or in a case where a non-Jew shouldn't have lit the lights for the Jew, one shouldn't use for Havdalah. In the chat group, someone has asked, in a big crowd, is it not sufficient to see the flame from a distance, as it lighting up the room in which you are and benefiting from it, albeit not in the best way? Well, the measure of benefit that one's meant to get from the light should be a close benefit, a benefit such that the light is sufficient that you can distinguish between two similar objects like your fingernails or the like. If you have enough light from that, then that's sufficient. You also have to see the flame, not just the general light. One should at least be able to see the flame. If those two conditions are fulfilled, then you're correct. Even in a large room, one might be able to fulfill the mitzvah in this manner. So this concludes the halachas of borei ma'orei ha'esh, that component of Havdalah. Now, I'd like to step back and look more generally at Havdalah and the halachic place of women in this mitzvah. There are two discussions around this. The more commonly known discussion is around the issue of women drinking from the wine of Havdalah, and the myth that this is something profoundly problematic, halachically problematic. There's legends floating around that, as if there's Jewish sources that say if a woman drinks from Havdalah wine, then she will grow a beard and the like. There really are no such sources whatsoever. But I do want to explain what the basis of the halachic question over women drinking Havdalah wine is, so that we can try and understand where this discussion comes from. Though, as I said, there's a lot of mythology associated with this, and no, to the best of my knowledge, not a single authentic source that says this legend. But before we do that, we actually need to understand what is the obligation of ladies in Havdalah. Now, last week we discussed at length, I'm not going to repeat it this week, the source of Havdalah is from a twin concept to Kiddush. The Rambam at least is of the view, the Pasuk says, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshei, remember, or perhaps more accurately translated as mention Shabbos to sanctify it, and we mention Shabbos at its beginning with Kiddush, and at its end with Havdalah. So this is a fulfillment of the mitzvah Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshei, and the source of Havdalah according to many opinions. However, there are alternative opinions that see the source of Havdalah as something else, as being derived from Lahavdil bein HaKodesh or bein HaChol, our need to distinguish between Kedusha and the rest of the week, the secular, based upon a Gemara and Shavuos and other sources. So the source of Havdalah is either akin to Kiddush, or perhaps from another requirement to separate between Shabbos and the weekday, which we will discuss next week in more detail. Now, Havdalah is a time-bound positive mitzvah, and therefore we would think that this is something that ladies are exempt from. Exempt from, not obligated, but can do, like all time-bound mitzvahs. However, Havdalah is a Shabbos positive mitzvah, and there is a rule that all positive mitzvahs on Shabbos apply equally to men and to women. The prohibitions of Shabbos, the prohibition on work, shomer, God, Shabbos not to do anything that's prohibited, applies to men and ladies. And the Gemara understands that Zocher v'shomer, they are compared to each other, that Shabbos is a package deal. And the positive mitzvahs of Shabbos are an obligation on ladies, even though they are time-bound mitzvahs. Now, based on that, if Havdalah is a fulfillment of Zocher es Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho, one would assume it is an obligation on ladies as much as it is on men. If Havdalah is something else, some other sort of time-bound mitzvah, like separating between Shabbos and the weekday, then one can question the issue. In addition, even if the derivation of Havdalah is Zocher es Yom HaShabbos, is mentioning the sanctity of Shabbos at its beginning and its end, nonetheless, it is a fact that the mitzvah is done after Shabbos rather than on Shabbos itself. And maybe when we say Shabbos is a package deal, we mean all the mitzvahs that are done on Shabbos, but not mitzvahs that are done after Shabbos, even though what generates and causes the mitzvah is Shabbos. So in brief, Havdalah is a Shabbos mitzvah. It's a mitzvah associated with the Kedusha of Shabbos, but done after Shabbos. And therefore, there are alternative opinions that say that even though Shabbos mitzvahs are obligations on ladies, Havdalah is a weekday mitzvah, time-bound, and therefore not a chiyuv, not an obligation on ladies. So this remains a subject of dispute. Is there a chiyuv, is there an obligation on ladies, at least as far as Torah law is concerned, or even rabbinic law, to do the mitzvah of Havdalah? Is it like all Shabbos time-bound mitzvahs, in which men and women are absolutely equal, or is it a mitzvah which is time-bound, linked to Motzei Shabbos, and therefore not an obligation on ladies? The Shulchan Aruch, interestingly, doesn't completely resolve this, though he indicates his preference. And the Shulchan Aruch says that women are obligated in Havdalah just as they're obligated in Kiddush, and then he says there are those who disagree. Now, I don't want to go into this in too much detail, but the Shulchan Aruch was written with great precision by Rabbi Yosef Karo, and he indicates his preferred view by how he structures his sentences. So whenever you learn the Shulchan Aruch, there are language indicators, even when he brings multiple views, as to which his preference is. And in this case, he indicates that his preference is that women are obligated in Havdalah, because he brings that as the standard view, and then he brings, but there are others who say not. So even though he brings the alternative view, his core halachic psak is, his core ruling is that ladies are obligated in Havdalah. This is the view of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, and the posek, the final decisive psak for Sfardim. However, the Ramah Moshe Isserlis, wrote footnotes on the Shulchan Aruch, in which he brings Ashkenazi practice, and the Ramah says no. The Ramah says since there's a disagreement on this issue, women should not say Havdalah for themselves, but rather they should hear it from men. Now I want to just explain, I've often referenced the Shulchan Aruch and Rabbi Yosef Karo. I don't think I've ever told the story behind this dual work, so I'll just very briefly use this as a chance to tell the fascinating story of how this doubly written book of the Shulchan Aruch and the comments of the Ramah came to be, and how it ended up as the final work of halachic practice for all Jews. So in Safat, in North Israel, lived a very prominent rabbinic leader. We're talking here in the early 1500s, born in of Spanish descent, born in Toledo in Spain, ran away at the time of the expulsion and ended up eventually in Eretz Yisrael. And he was the foremost posek of his generation. And he decided that the weight of accumulated halacha needed a work of codification. There had been a lot of disruption in particularly Sephardi history due to the expulsion, and he set out to write a definitive halachic work in which he summarized all the halachic conclusions. And he called this work Shulchan Aruch, which means a laid table, because just like when you have a laid table, you can find everything in its place, the cups and the spoons and the cutleries and the plates. This was a laid table in which all the halachas were arranged clearly. Now, at the same time as he was writing his halachic work in Tzfat in North Israel, a contemporary of his, a younger contemporary of his, called Moshe Isserlis, who lived in faraway Krakow in Poland, independently decided also to write a decisive halachic work. Due to disruptions in the Ashkenazi world, there had been large-scale migration due to persecution from the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, from West to East Europe. East Europe was rising to prominence as a Torah center, whilst Western Europe was going into somewhat of a decline. And in a similar parallel manner, Reb Moshe Isserles, a young rabbi in Krakow, chief rabbi of Krakow, a genius, a phenomenal scholar, decided to write a decisive halachic work, not realizing that in faraway Tzafat, his contemporary Rabbi Yosef Karo was writing a similar work. Rabbi Yosef Karo beat the Ramah to the job by a couple of years, and this phenomenal new work, the Shulchan Aruch, began spreading through the Jewish world until it arrived in Krakow, and the Ramah found it. And it reached the Ramah, and the Ramah now faced a choice. Rabbi Moshe Isserles faced a choice. Should he still go ahead and publish his work, which he had dedicated years of his life to, or should he step back? And he had every justification to publish his work, because Rabbi Yosef Karo had decided the halacha in accordance with Sephardi practice. The Ramah could decide the halacha in accordance with Ashkenazi practice. And he made a decision not to publish an independent work. He buried his manuscripts, and instead, in an act of sacrifice and modesty, he just wrote notes on the Shulchan Aruch, introduced with the word Hagar, a note, printed to this day together, interwoven into the text of the Shulchan Aruch, with the Shulchan Aruch written in a large font and the Ramah written in a slightly smaller font so that one can see the difference. And he called his work the Mappa, the tablecloth. So the Shulchan Aruch means the laid table, and he said, I'm just spreading a cloth over it. And very modestly, throughout the work of the Shulchan Aruch, he, whenever Ashkenazi practice differs, he just writes that our minhag or our practice is different. And this act of sacrifice and Mesiras Nefesh and modesty ensured that the Shulchan Aruch was one unified work for Ashkenazim and Sephardim, effectively co-authored by two wonderful Talmidei Chachamim and Poskim, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the main body of the text for Sephardim, and the Ramah, who wrote the footnotes for Ashkenazim. So this is an example of a disagreement between the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch. And the Ramah says that no, women shouldn't recite Havdalah for themselves. Now this is a very puzzling ruling. I mean, the Ramah is entitled to say, look, I'm concerned about the opinion that says this isn't an obligation on women, but why shouldn't women be allowed to do the mitzvah if they so wish? It's not maybe a chiyuv, because the Ramah says, is of the view perhaps that this is a time-bound mitzvah, but what's to stop a lady choosing to do the mitzvah? After all, ladies can choose to do mitzvahs which are time-bound also, and very often do so. They listen to shofar or blow a little bit of esrog. They have access to all the mitzvahs. They're simply not obligated. Why should they not be able to do this mitzvah? Now, I'm not going to go into all the technicalities of possible answers for the Ramah. This remains a controversial matter to this day. Why the Ramah would be so concerned about them doing this mitzvah? Surely ladies can choose to do mitzvahs, and importantly, can choose to do the mitzvah with a bracha. So a lady chooses to shake the lulav and esrog, does so with a bracha according to Ashkenazi practice. Paradoxically, many Sephardim don't. Rabbi Yosef Karo is of the opinion that once a lady can choose to listen to shofar or shake lulav and esrog, they shouldn't make a bracha on it. But the Ramah himself said that they can. So why should they not be able to make Havdalah, which is a bracha itself? So there's extensive discussion around this point. However, the bottom line is that for Ashkenazim, even though a lady who has the option of hearing Havdalah from a man should do that rather than saying Havdalah herself, in respect of the psak of the Ramah, who believes that ladies should not make Havdalah, nonetheless, if one is in a situation where one is unable to hear Havdalah from a man, a lady can make Havdalah for herself, because it's true, there's an argument whether this is an obligation on women or not, whether this is a time-bound mitzvah from which ladies are exempt or not. Nonetheless, there's no reason they can't choose to do the mitzvah. So in terms of practical halacha, in deference to what remains an unresolved dispute, if one is in a situation where one can easily hear Havdalah from a man and avoid getting caught up in this very fraught argument, that's the best practice. Nonetheless, if one's in a situation where one needs to say Havdalah for oneself, a lady can absolutely do so. So this is the first level of discussion. Now, having said that, is there any issue with the lady drinking the wine? And what about the subsidiary brachas of Havdalah? Because after all, we discussed last week, Havdalah consists of 5 parts. The first part of Havdalah are the psukim, the verses of bitochen and trust in Hashem, in which we daven for blessing over the week. And as we enter into the working week, we remind ourselves and reassert our trust in Hashem. These psukim are a matter of minhag, of custom, and ladies can certainly say them no problem at all. But then there's another 4 components. The bracha of Bori Pri Hagafen, which is a core part of Havdalah, because Havdalah has to be said on wine. The bracha of Hamavdil ben Kodesh Chol, which is the actual text of Havdalah that we've just been talking about. And then the besomim and the fire, the flame. So we need to understand those components. Are they all part of one discussion, or are there differences between these components? So to summarize what we've said so far, core Havdalah, the actual bracha of Havdalah, Hamavdil ben Kodesh Chol, a matter of debate whether ladies are obligated or not, a matter of debate whether they can choose to do it or not. The presumption, the conclusion in Halacha is ladies can choose to do it, though in deference to the debate, if they have an option to avoid this issue and to have someone else say Havdalah for them, a man say Havdalah for them, that is the better option. That's point number 1. What about all the other components of the mitzvah? And in particular, the issue of drinking the wine of Havdalah. Now, the bottom line of the discussion will be that if a lady makes Havdalah for herself, she definitely and categorically can drink the wine, and there's no problem with that, and in fact should do so. And the reason she should do so is because she's obligated in the mitzvah of Havdalah. She's done the mitzvah of Havdalah as discussed. This is the practice she's chosen to do, and she's fulfilling the mitzvah. And since she's fulfilling the mitzvah of Havdalah has to be done over wine, and therefore it is appropriate to say it over wine. That's how the mitzvah is done, and to drink the wine. What happens if the lady is hearing Havdalah from someone else? Well, we know that the minhag is not to drink the wine. And the question is why? Why should there be a minhag not to drink the wine? After all, no one has a custom not to drink wine, for example, in Kiddush. Havdalah, as we already said, is the twin of Kiddush. Why should a lady not be able to drink Havdalah wine if she can drink Kiddush wine? And I have to tell you that, as I already mentioned, despite the various mythologies and legends around this, that if a lady drinks wine, then all sorts of terrible things could happen, there are no sources that say this. And the most that the sources say is that there is a minhag, a custom, for ladies not to drink wine. And it's actually not even so clear how well attested to this custom is. It's not really mentioned in classic halachic sources. The first source that I could find that mentions this is the Shloh. The Shloh is Shnei Luchas HaBris, Rabbi Shaya Horovitz, who died in 1630. And in the sort of halachic tradition, therefore, we're talking about a relatively late source that mentions the concept of ladies not drinking Havdalah wine. In fact, there is some evidence from earlier sources that the minhag used to be that ladies did drink Havdalah wine. Reb Amram Gaon, from the era of the Gaonim, brings this practice of ladies to drink Havdalah wine. The Machzor Vitri, which was a work written by a student of Rashi, who records the minhag in North France and the view of Rashi, brings that ladies used to drink wine. So this is a relatively late minhag. Nonetheless, this has become the standard practice that ladies don't drink wine. Why is this? Why should they not be able to drink the wine? So there's a number of answers put forward as to the source of not drinking wine. The first source is the Shloh, who brings Kabbalistic reasons not to do so, and I'm not going to go in this forum into the Kabbalistic reasons why the Shloh is of the opinion, but he brings reasons in Kabbalah that ladies shouldn't drink wine. Incidentally, only wine. So if one makes Havdalah, and we'll discuss this in future weeks, or maybe if we have time even in this week, if one makes Havdalah on another liquid, and we'll discuss how one might do that, then this Kabbalistic reason wouldn't apply, and one would be able to make, a lady would be allowed to drink the liquid that's drunk. There are, however, other halachic reasons. The truth is, it never used to be the practice for other people to drink the Havdalah wine at all. Only the person making Havdalah used to drink the wine. So it's possible that actually this minhag developed from the fact that only the person saying Havdalah used to drink the wine. Why is it that people used to not share the wine in Havdalah, even though we share the wine in Kiddush? And the answer is because when we say Kiddush, it doesn't matter if the person making the Kiddush drinks a minimal quantity of the Kiddush. We'll discuss that when we one day learn the Halachot of Kiddush. If people drink some of the Kiddush wine and only drink a minimal quantity, there isn't an issue with the after bracha, because they're then going to go ahead and eat a meal and bench after that. However, Havdalah, one doesn't normally do with a meal, and certainly the Havdalah either way would need its own bracha achrona, its own after bracha, and therefore people drinking minimal quantities gets them into a confusion whether to say the bracha achrona or not, and therefore it may be that the Havdalah wine was never shared with anyone, such that only one person drinks it, and they drink a considerable amount, and therefore will definitely make the bracha achrona. So this is a second reason why perhaps ladies didn't drink wine, simply because the wine wasn't shared with members of the household at all. There are a number of other suggestions as to why ladies shouldn't drink the wine, and I'll just share some of them with you because some of them are very interesting. One suggestion is as follows. If we think about the order of brachas, the first bracha made is Borei Pri Hagofen. That's the bracha that's going to be the allowance to drink the wine. However, we then continue with other brachas, Hamadzul ben Kodesh L'chol, etc. And we already recorded that there's a debate over whether ladies are obligated in this bracha or not. Now, if they are obligated, these additional brachas don't interrupt between the Borei Pri Hagofen and the drinking of the wine. However, if one's not obligated, maybe they are an interruption. Let me explain this a little bit more clearly. If I say a bracha on food, Borei Pri Hagofen, on drinking some wine, and then I talk for 3 minutes, and then I want to drink the wine, if I haven't drunk any wine first, there's an interruption between the bracha and the wine. I have to say the bracha on the apple or the bracha on the wine, and immediately eat it. I can't interrupt with some other thing or conversation between the bracha and the eating. Now, in that case, how does Havdalah work? I make the bracha Borei Pri Hagofen, and then I interrupt before I drink the wine, and I say Hamadzul ben Kodesh L'chol, and Borei Me'or Eish on the fire, and the bracha on the somim. There's all sorts of interruptions. And the reason it doesn't matter is because this is all part of one bundle of Havdalah. However, this is only if the Borei Pri Hagofen is being said as part of Havdalah. If someone is obligated in Havdalah. Since we have concerns that maybe there is no obligation in Havdalah, therefore, perhaps the alternative bracha is the brachas of Havdalah, an interruption, an illegitimate interruption between the Borei Pri Hagofen and the drinking of the wine, and therefore perhaps this is another halachic basis for the reason not to drink wine. Now I have to tell you, this is not very convincing halachic reasoning. This was a theory put forward by the great Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, the Rav of Yerushalayim, in the 50s and 60s, and it engendered a lot of debate and discussion. It isn't in general considered a particularly clear reason. And the bottom line is, what remains as the halachic conclusion is, that there isn't a clear halachic reason why a lady shouldn't drink wine. Nonetheless, in deference to the recorded custom, recorded by a great figure, the Shalah, who alludes to Kabbalistic reasons, the practice is that ladies don't drink Havdalah wine unless they are making Havdalah for themselves. But if they are making Havdalah for themselves, they are able to drink the wine and should do so because this is the halachic requirement. And there isn't really a basis for the clear sources, for the sort of legends around how awful this is to drink the wine of Havdalah. So this is the wine of Havdalah, and this is the mitzvah of Havdalah itself. What about the other brachas? Now, the bracha of B'somim, there's absolutely no reason why a lady is making Havdalah shouldn't also make this bracha. The bracha of B'somim is a very beautiful bracha, a beichas hanenin, a bracha of benefiting, much the same way as we make a bracha when we eat. We also make a bracha when we smell a pleasant smell. And therefore, there's no reason one shouldn't be able to make a lady making Havdalah. There's no reason she shouldn't be able to make Havdalah, Basomim for herself also. What about the bracha of Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish, the bracha over the fire? So here we have a controversy. The Biur Halacha, the work written by the great Chafetz Chaim, the great halachic work, is of the opinion that a lady should not make the bracha on the fire. And the reason for this is because this is a time-bound positive mitzvah, as we discussed previously. Now, Havdalah itself, a lady is obligated because it's part of Shabbos mitzvahs. And as we already discussed, Shabbos is a package deal where ladies are obligated in all the Shabbos mitzvahs. But Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish is not a fundamental part of Havdalah. We do it as a once a week praise to Hashem. It's not a bracha of benefit. I'm not consuming the fire. I'm just benefiting. I'm just praising Hashem for it. Much like we make brachas on thunder and lightning and beautiful scenes and high mountains and oceans, we similarly make a bracha of praise to Hashem on fire. And since this bracha is time bound because we only make it once a week, because we the whole time benefit from light, therefore it's a time-bound positive mitzvah, and therefore the Chafetz Chaim argues that ladies should be exempt from it. Later poskim are very troubled with this view of the Chafetz Chaim, and they don't find it convincing at all. It is true that we only make this bracha once a week, but fundamentally it wouldn't appear to be a time-bound positive mitzvah. After all, what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is praising Hashem. We have an obligation to praise Hashem whenever. It's not particularly time-bound. Any time of the week, if you see thunder or lightning, or you see a mountain, or the sea, or a beautiful view, one will say a bracha of praise to Hashem. So this is part of a general string of brachas to praise, of praises to Hashem. It just so happens to be that this bracha we make once a week. And therefore, Moshe Feinstein and others are of the opinion that there's no reason why ladies shouldn't be able to make this bracha. And even if they're not obligated, nonetheless, why can they not choose to do so? It's a bracha of praise to Hashem. It wouldn't appear to be a problem for ladies to make. Now, to the best of my knowledge, even though in general we would follow the view of the Chafetz Chaim, I think the general practice is like Moshe Feinstein, and this is certainly the way I would paskin, that ladies can and should make Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish also. Moshe Feinstein's view seems to have been adopted as a convincing argument, and therefore there doesn't seem to be a reason for women not to make the bracha of Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish also and fulfill the mitzvah of praise to Hashem on that bracha itself. So this is the obligation of fulfilling the mitzvah of Havdalah. Core Havdalah itself remains a matter of debate, but if a lady doesn't have a man who makes Havdalah for her, she can make the Havdalah herself. Besomim, no reason not to. Drinking the wine, custom not to, but if a lady is making Havdalah for herself, she absolutely can. Borei Ma'orei Ha'ish, perhaps a time-bound bracha. Nonetheless, general practice is as per the argument of Moshe Feinstein that a lady can make the bracha on it. What happens if the husband has already made Havdalah, for example, in shul? Can he still perform the mitzvah for his wife when he gets home? Or would it be better if she fulfills the mitzvah by itself? And the general answer to this is that if one has fulfilled a mitzvah, one can nonetheless fulfill the mitzvah again for someone else if that person is obligated in the mitzvah. Now, it's true that we are unclear as to the obligation of ladies in the mitzvah of Havdalah. On the other hand, as we just said, ladies do make the mitzvah of Havdalah themselves, in which case it would appear that a man can also make Havdalah for her. Nonetheless, because of the doubt in the obligation of ladies, the general pasuk is that if the man has already fulfilled the mitzvah, the lady should say Havdalah for herself. However, for some reason she can't, the man can again exempt her in the mitzvah of Havdalah, even though he's already fulfilled the mitzvah himself. But certainly a man should have in mind not to fulfill the mitzvah of Havdalah in shul when they hear it from the chazan, the Baal Tefillah in Shul on Motzi Shabbos, if they are going to go home and then make the bracha of Havdalah on behalf of their wives. So this concludes the explanation of the role of ladies in Havdalah. So we have now spoken about the bracha of Havdalah, we've spoken about the mitzvah of ner, the candle, and we've spoken how this translates across to ladies' obligations in the mitzvah. In Mi'at Hashem next week, we will continue this discussion and we'll look at wine or grape juice, the liquid upon which one makes Havdalah. We will discuss the various customs around spilling the wine or not spilling the wine, and we will also look at the beautiful bracha of Somim, and hopefully with that concludes our mini-series on the mitzvah of Havdalah. But for this evening, I will stop now unless there are any questions, and wish everyone a good evening. And thank you so much for, as always, for joining this shir. I'm not going to start the new topic of, given that we've only got a couple of minutes left, I'm going to stop for now, and we'll continue looking at the mitzvah of the fire and the somim next week.
Thank you so much.